If you're thinking about building your own table loom, this is an excellent book to buy. It's very well written with a lot of detail and instructions on how to build the loom, and it does come out very well and weaves very well. The fabric on this spinning chair that I have here was woven on this loom right after I built it. I want to review the loom and also show some modifications and changes that I made for my own personal use of the loom. I'm just going to give you an overall look of the whole thing put together, even with the modifications. I did add legs to the loom. The table loom originally didn't have legs, and I thought it would be nice to add some pipe to make the legs. I need to add some knobs here. They broke off. The shed mechanism works very well on this loom. I changed the beams, and I'll go into that detail a little bit more later. I do use rubber bands when I'm warping the loom. I use rubber bands to hold the reed in an upright position. When you're making this loom, even after having to buy the reed and your shuttles and things like that, you're still going to be at a fraction of the cost of what it would take to get started with a brand new table loom. Here is a close-up of the legs. I changed a few of the fittings from the original pattern so that I could add the legs out the bottom. I put cross pieces in several places to give it some stability. I left a knee space in the front so that I could get my chair up underneath without a cross piece in the way, and that works really well. It's really steady. There's a Ravelry group for the PVC loom that you can go to. It has a lot of users on there, and it's been around for quite a while. But the original plans had your beams, your cloth beam and your warp beam that was suspended here with a metal rod, and it had a piece here that held it in place. And I originally used Corel Draw to draw my own pawl and ratchet, and I cut them out on my scroll saw. And that picture also, I think that the author has posted this picture on his website, and also on Ravelry you'll see pictures of my original setup for this. But they were all on the inside right there, and now I've changed everything to the outside. Now I'll go into more of what I've done there. But the original system that he has in the book worked well also. I just didn't have a lot of strength to tension everything, so I came up with my own pawl and ratchet, and that helped a lot too. But I didn't have anything to grip onto to roll the beam. I started looking at some of my other looms and came up with this mechanism here that's easier for me to turn, and then I made a new pawl and ratchet out of just an old cutting board, and I cut it out on my scroll saw, and I'll do some close-up shots of that also. But it works exceptionally well. It's easy for me to roll everything up. I would shorten this a little bit because when I walk by the loom I keep running into it, so I don't really need it sticking out that far, so I'm going to cut off about an inch of that. So I just finished that yesterday, so I haven't actually woven with this, but I am in the process of warping the loom, and so far it seems like it's going to work well. The rod I'm using here is a 1 3/8 inch dowel, and I believe that this rod is, I think it's a 3/8, and that's my apron rod. And when I cut the Texol cords, I cut it to where my apron rod would go about halfway across. So when I'm tying on, you can do whatever you want, but that's what I, wanted it to have, at least that much length on it. And I had to drill, let's see if I can get the tension off of this. I drilled several holes straight through the dowel, and then I tied my Texol, I ran my Texol in there and used this extra little dowel in there to tie everything together. For the handle, it's pretty obvious, I drilled a hole all the way through so that you could have this handle to turn the beam. On the other end, I put a little dowel through there to keep it from sliding through. I didn't glue it in because I want to be able to take this rod out if I need to. So everything's just kind of tensioned in there. It's just hammered in. On the other side of these, I put a little spring with some eye bolts so that this would spring back in place. You don't have to have it, but it does hold it better. When you're turning that thing, it'll pop back into place, so it'll only go in that direction, but it won't go back in the opposite, and that's where you get good tension. On the back warp beam, this is a mirror image. It's going to be swapped the other way. And for the fittings, I don't know if you can tell in here, but this is actually a cross piece. And I cut off the ends of this so that I could run the dowel all the way through. And I wanted it to be flush on the outside. I had to do some sanding because it was hard to cut it straight. And I believe this one, I didn't have enough cross pieces, and I think this one is actually a T. And I put it on my drill press and then just drilled a hole through to the other side so that the dowel could go all the way through. But whatever you have on hand will work. I'm sure there's some fancy fittings you can find online that would already have these holes. But I didn't want this extra piece there on either side. I wanted all the space that I could get for that. So that's working really well to hold that dowel in. And for this, I guess you call this the ratchet part of it, I put some screws. Once I decided where I wanted my beam to be, I drilled a hole through there and put some tiny screws with small heads straight through to catch onto the dowel so that it'll stay. I only put two. I put one on this side and one on the other, and it's holding pretty tight. The wooden ones that I had made before started breaking apart. I tried plywood, I tried different things, and they were chipping really badly. So I think that this material here is excellent to use. We'll see after I've used it a few times. I haven't actually woven on it yet, but I have wound my warp on, and the tensioning system is working good for me. I'm going to try to get all of this in the camera with all this white stuff going on. You might not be able to see the seams where all of these pieces meet. This is your elbow, and there's a little seam right there. And then you have that cross piece that I cut the ends off of from here to here. And then below that I have that another T going off in that other direction. So there's three fittings here. And inside of here I cut a little 2-inch piece of pipe to join them together. I haven't glued anything on the loom because I want to be able to take it apart. I had it in storage for a while, and it's pretty easy to take apart and store if you're not going to be using it for a while. So just to show you how I joined those, it's just a little 2-inch piece of pipe in there to join those together. If I would have left this piece over here as 6 inches, or however long this is, that was the original piece that was attached to this elbow. And if I would have added another fitting in there to add my beam, it would have raised this up a lot higher. And so I ended up just getting rid of this piece here and then cutting some scrap pipe to join those fittings together. I'm going to finish warping the loom, and I'm going to weave some on it. This is still, I guess, a prototype in progress, and so I want to see how well it does for my tensioning, and I'll come back. On the reed holder, I used 2 of these channels. This one's covered in duct tape. I bought these at Lowe's. I had bought the material that he recommended in the book, but they cut it the wrong length at Lowe's, and it was really rough wood, and I didn't want to go through all that sanding and everything, so I decided to buy these channels. I think this is aluminum, but you just loosen this bolt, and then you slide your reed in there, and then you tighten everything down, and it holds the reed pretty well. So that was another modification that I did. I believe that this part of the reed holder is the same as the instructions in the book. When I changed all the fittings to add this extra beam in here, I wasn't sure how it would affect the height of the reed holder. The dimensions, the height of the breast beam to the floor changed just slightly. I think it was less than an inch, about a ½ inch. So I wasn't sure if I would be able to beat correctly if I didn't change the height of this also. But I'm going to test it out when I weave, and if I need to make an adjustment to the height of this, all I would have to change out would be these little upright post, and it shouldn't be too hard to do. But right now it seems like it's going to be okay. Okay, I'm getting ready to advance the warp, and normally I'm going to just try to stay in the camera. I'm going to reach across in the back and loosen that a little and lock it down, and then wind the front. I'm not sure if it's in the camera, so I'm just going to slide this around. And it's locking in really nicely, so I don't think there's going to be any problem with my tensioning system. I did notice, though, when I got ready to turn this one, that it is a little loose going out that way. So what I'm going to do is unscrew this on both sides, and I'm going to slide my ratchet over a little bit so that that doesn't move around so much. So let me tighten up my warp. But my little spring is working very well to help me with my tension. So I've already woven a few rows. I just dropped my shuttle. I wove a few rows here, so I like this setup with this tensioning system very well. Just to show how the shed mechanism works on this machine, in case you're planning on building one, I think I already mentioned that I had broken the knobs on these. A knob comes in really handy. Also in the back, you probably can't see it, but underneath here I have a thumbtack stuck up in there to keep it from sliding back too far. And one of them, I believe, fell off. I need to add one here. Also, I need to lengthen my cord on this first, what do you call it, shaft, my number 1 shaft. Whenever I pull the shaft up, and I'm not left-handed, so when I pull the shaft up and I'm finished weaving and I go to drop it down, sometimes it sticks. It stays up when it should go down. and I believe it has to do with my cord being way too short here, and so I need to fix this here so that it doesn't hang up. It's been in the storage closet for a while, so there's a lot of stuff going on, but it didn't do that before. But the rest of them, they rise and drop like they should. Now occasionally these will get a little unlevel like that. All you have to do is just kind of tap them like that and you can get them all lined up. But for the method that this is put together, these things really work well. There's other ways that you can make these shafts using metal, flat metal pieces and using these string heddles in there, but I like this just fine. It works good. When I had this loom set up before, I had made two little hammocks, one on each side of the loom. This comes from a shacked flip loom, and I had my hammocks, had some holes drilled here, and I had my hammocks on each side of the loom like that to put my shuttles down when I needed to. The shacked loom, the little hammock, I don't know what they call it, but the hammock goes on the front of the loom like this. So I think I've misplaced the ones that I had originally made, so I believe that I'm going to make another set or at least one to go on the front of the loom. Not sure how it's going to affect how that winds on, but it shouldn't be a problem. What was wrong with my first shaft not going up and down like it should was there's some sticky stuff on my cord. When I had this in storage, I had everything taped together, and I think some of the sticky stuff got on the cord, but I'm wiping it off and it's getting better. So on the pattern that I'm doing here, I'm alternating between the odd numbered shafts and the even numbered shafts. So I'm going to be raising 1 and 3 and then 2 and 4. So right now I need to do an even row, or open the even shed. So I'm going to open up shaft number 2, and that has raised up all the threads that are needed for shaft number 2, and then shaft number 4 completes that shed. So I have some floating selvages here, so I'm going to do my brown color next, and I'm going over the selvage on this side and under on the other, so I'm going to lift the one on the other side. I don't always use floating selvages, but in this case I did. So I'm going to do 2 picks of the brown, a bead on the open shed, and then I close that shed and open the odd numbered sheds, and then bead again, and then do another row of or another pick of the brown. So I'm going to go over the selvage and under the selvage on the right hand side. So that's my second pick of the brown. So I beat, change sheds, and then bead again. Now you see my shed number 1 is working better now. So that's all there is to it when you're working with this type of a loom.